it is my destiny to someday complete this set, and you're going to help me. And I'm getting so close to like nailing finally what all the set mechanics are. And I don't necessarily need any more, but there are two sort of problems, things I'm interested, design challenges I'm interested in solving before I round out and finalize all of my set mechanics. So the first of them is really simple. It's just I need a combat mechanic. I need something that's going to incentivize people to actually attack, to turn their cardboard sideways. I've explored a few different variations on them, but I need something that's really Zelda flavored that's going to get people to turn cardboard sideways. And it could be something really simple. It could even just be something that exists already, like the survival mechanic, for instance. I'm a huge fan of that mechanic. I'm not sure it's super Zelda coded flavor wise, but something as simple as that. Boast, training could be it. Mentor could be it. That's pretty Zelda focused. Battle cry, raid. I don't know. You guys tell me. What is existing that might work that I could just slot in as the combat mechanic, or what is very Zelda focused that could be a combat mechanic. One, idea explored is, Z targeting, locking on. That's very Zelda focused in terms of combat. And, workshopped it with some folks in the Beacon of Creation Discord, and credit to Juliet, who came up with this particular idea, which I really love. It was my favorite of all of them. I think it's a really cool mechanic. It doesn't satisfy, however, unfortunately, my original design goal, which is to get people to attack. In fact, this mechanic as is kind of dirtily and gets people to wait. But in any case, I need some kind of combat mechanic that's very Zelda flavored, ideally, for me to incentivize people to attack, I think. I mean, I haven't done playtests yet. Maybe I'm wrong, but I have defensive battles, which is going to slow the game down. I have bosses, which are just cards that transform on death, which will also slow the game down and create more board stalls. So I think that I'm going to need a mechanic that's incentivizing attacking in some way. But that's one thing. That's not even what this video is about. Just tell me if you've got ideas. The video is actually about this mechanic and the problem it's trying to solve and variations on this mechanic. So before I dive into this particular version of the mechanic, let's talk about the problem that I'm creating for myself that I'm trying to solve. In previous videos, you may have noticed that the signpost uncommons that I've designed there's two of them, and they are variations on a theme. So for example, Captain Hawes and Trirod both care about tokens, but Trirod cares a lot more about large tokens because it can copy them, and Captain Hawes wants small, cheap, low-to-the-ground tokens so that it can do a go-wide, pumpy strategy. They both work together and can help trigger each other, and they both generally care about tokens, so even if I draft neither of them, there's still a consistent identity to green-white, but if I draft Trirod in one draft, it's going to feel very different to me than if I draft Captain Hawes in another. So my question was, could I use each of the signpost uncommons to create some larger amounts of variance between different drafts so that the green-white draft doesn't always feel the same? And I think that, these kinds of cards are satisfying that goal, but I was wondering if I could take it a step further. And I could say maybe there is no consistent green-white archetype, and it's highly idiosyncratic and dependent upon certain build around cards you might get. So green white could be food, it could be life gain, it could be go wide, it could be enchantments. It just depends on what green white build around card or cards you get that then informs the whole rest of your draft experience. The reason I want to do that is, number one, it creates variance between drafts, which I think is really interesting. But the other one is that, what is my goal here with the archetypes? And the archetype that I like the most, which I've mentioned this before, I think, in these design videos, the archetype I like the most is blue-black tempo trials. And one of the reasons I like it the most is it feels the most role-play-y to me. Like, it feels like I am a dungeon boss or a dungeon designer, and the archetype really supports that idea and feeling. And so blue-black feels very Zelda to me. It feels like I am a force or a character in Zelda. And that is really what I'm trying to capture here. Green-white doesn't quite do that as much. But you can do that even more if your strategy of your deck is really idiosyncratically revolving around a particular card. So if I draft the Master Sword, I might draft a completely different set of commons and more highly pick certain D or C commons than I otherwise would, and then I get a really unique draft experience because I drafted the Master Sword, or because I drafted Zelda, or because I drafted Beetle the Merchant, or whatever. And then it feels very roleplay. But can you do that in a limited environment? can you have these build around cards that inform your whole deck strategy? There's lots of design challenges with that. But one of them is, the biggest one is, how are you certain that you're even going to get that build around card? That's the biggest one. If I have these really idiosyncratic build arounds, what happens if I don't ever draw it and get to play it in my deck? Then my deck just falls flat because unlike in traditional archetypes, you don't need the signpost uncommons to do your thing, right? There's many different cards that are token generators and token payoffs, so I can do that using my other set of commons and uncommons without needing the signpost uncommon in particular. So if I don't draw into it, my deck is still doing its thing with synergy. So the biggest challenge I'm trying to solve is exactly that. How do you consistently get the build around card? Now there is a draft format that solves this problem. Can you think of what it is? Drum roll, please. It is Commander Draft, right? So the big way that it solves this particular problem, there's lots that's going on in the format that helps us that I would need to think about, like, okay, how else can I solve these problems than the way that the Commander Draft did, blah, blah, blah. But the biggest one is consistently drawing into the build around card. And they solve that problem because it's your freaking commander. So it's always in the command zone. Even if it gets removed, you can replay it. But even just having it castable from the command zone, like sort of companion-esque, makes it that much more viable to say, I'm going to make my whole deck revolve around this one particular card's synergy, where this particular card itself isn't good in a vacuum, but if I can design my deck around it, then the quality of all the cards in my deck increase, right? But can I do that without it being a commander format is the question that I'm asking. So what other way can I ensure that players can consistently get these idiosyncratic build-around cards? And imagining that all of these idiosyncratic build-around cards are legendary, let's just imagine that, so that I can use that as a tutor or whatever, as a typal restriction on these abilities is kind of important. One thing I can do that's important that Commander Draft does as well is I can guarantee a number of legendaries per pack. So if I say each pack has 1 or 2 legendaries, then I'm making it much more viable that this is a thing that people can actually do and build around because they're going to have one of those build arounds as a first pick, or second pick or whatever. But the big one is, okay, how do we consistently find them? So here's where I started, is this ability here, Legendary Destiny. It says, if you haven't triggered a Destiny ability this game, you may search your library for a legendary card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Otherwise, scry 2. So in this particular variation, Destiny is the actual keyword action, and Legendary is the specific typal restriction. In my format, every Destiny card would be a Legendary Destiny. You wouldn't have any other type. But in some future theoretical format, it could be like Equipment Destiny or Artifact Destiny or something else, right? But in this case, it's just it could also just be straight up Destiny. It could just say Destiny. So this gets there because it's consistently getting you that card. If you have a critical mass of enough of these Legendary Destiny cards in your deck, you're going to much more reliably, consistently be able to get your build around card. It doesn't do anything about it being removed. There's no like commander, it goes back to the command zone sort of thing, but at least you're guaranteed to draw into it. So again, I'm trying to like transpose the commander effect of this in Commander Draft into a non-commander format. It doesn't need to be recursible easily. You can solve that problem in other ways in your deck. If you're in white, if you're in black, if you're in green, you have ways to get that card back. If your legendary build around, it doesn't have to be a creature in this particular case. It could be a spell. If your legendary build around is a spell, then blue might have a way to get that back from the graveyard too, that kind of thing. So there's many different variations on this idea. Let's get into the weeds about some of the considerations. Number one, this says once per game. So really you're limited to one legendary card, which there are advantages and disadvantages to doing that. The advantage is that in the Commander Draft, you can have not just one commander, but sometimes two, if your commanders have partner, or in future draft formats like Baldur's Gate, I think they introduced this rule, where if you draft 2 monocolored legendary cards, they can be your commander together, and together they form your color identity instead of singularly. So you could have 1 red and 1 green commander, which together makes your deck have a red-green color identity. The combinatronics of that means that even though they have a huge array, I think it's 112 or maybe it's 122, I don't remember, in the original Commander Draft format, different commanders that you could choose from, Even so, you're going to get repeat games where it's like, okay, I'm drafting the Zelda deck again. I'm drafting the Link deck again. However, because of the combinatronics of partner and or two monocolored commanders, what that means is even if I'm drafting the Link deck again, it's now the Link and Zelda deck versus the Link and Ganon deck, which are going to feel really, really wildly different from each other, even though I'm still playing Link each time. So limiting it to only once per game means that I can only ever have one build around card, and I'm not taking advantage of that combinatronics. So that's a downside of this. An upside, though, is that it's not overpowering legendary cards otherwise. Because if this weren't once per game, like let's take a look at this variation of it, where it's not once per game. In this case, then it's much more highly incentivizing that, first of all, any legendary card I draft becomes that much better. Basically, every archetype in the set becomes a Legendary Matters archetype because I can tutor out my legendary cards, which makes them really good. Also, a downside of letting you do this an unlimited amount of times is it means that all your legendary cards can become toolkit cards. So it's okay if they're highly situational or they're silver bullet cards. Especially if you have like legendary hate bears, they get a lot better in a format that allows you to reliably tutor them out when you want them. And that's not necessarily what I want. Like, I don't want to say every legendary card gets better. That's not what I want to say. In fact, I want to say most cards are bad unless you're specifically taking advantage of their synergy because of your build around card. If it's a more general tutor, it's, that I can do repeatedly, then it's too highly incentivizes legendary cards. It's too highly incentivizing silver bullet and two toolkit cards in a way that I don't want. However, a downside of this particular way of formatting it is that the first time you do the destiny, it is card advantage, right? So it could be on a card draw effect like this. It could be on a pump ability, whatever. You're getting a card, which is way much better than the Scry 2 mode, right? So the way that I solved that here was, you may discard a card if you do tutor, otherwise scry 2. So, on its own, without this effect, it's never a card advantage. You have to discard a card to get the thing. That makes it a lot easier to balance, I think, and makes it not quite as good to just draft every legendary you see because they can be transformed into card advantage when you have legendary destiny, So they're not that much higher, but it's still pretty high because you can still tutor them out, which is really good. I mean, pitching a land to get a real playable in limited is really, really good. So even though this is not card advantage, it virtually is in the mid and late game where you're much more likely to want to pitch a land in a limited game scenario. So here are some other variations. One was, how about a commune with style effect? So commune with is just look at the top end cards, pick a creature from among them, put in your hand, put the rest in the bottom. So here's the variation. It has a keyword unseal, N. Look at the top end cards of your library. You may reveal a legendary or a land from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So this solves, some problems. One is it's not saying anymore that legendaries, you should just pick legendaries very highly. It's also not allowing you as much to do the legendary toolkit strategy. So you can't just draft legendaries as silver bullets, even if they're not relevant in the game, and as reliably tutor them out because this is not a tutor, it's card selection, right? But it's focused card selection, either legendary or its fallback mode of still getting you a land. I like this a lot for a few reasons. One, this, N thing allows you to modulate the power for different cards, and that's really useful as a card designer. It makes it a lot easier to print on a much wider variety of cards because of that. That is nice. I also like that it's repeatable. Like, I can have more than one legendary build-around card. In fact, I probably want more than one so that I can more reliably hit on this effect. But again, it's not so strong that I'm just taking every single legendary card I can. It really, especially if the format is really revolves around not cards that are good in a vacuum, but cards that rely on synergies to be good, then I'm not just taking every legendary card I can. It still has to fit my deck strategy, my idiosyncratic deck strategy. But it's saying I would really like multiple legendary cards that can do that. And so now I am getting kind of more into that combinatronics of which idiosyncratic legendary build-arounds can I make go together based off of the set of commons and uncommons that I'm seeing in the draft? So that's what's interesting to me. However, it not being a tutor makes this a lot less consistent. I mean, consider the commander scenario, right? You're guaranteed, it's guaranteed essentially in your opening hand, and you can guaranteed replay it. A card like, Legendary Destiny is still less reliable than Commander. Even though it's a tutor, it's still less reliable because you need to draw this card in order to tutor out that legendary card that you're trying to play with, right? And you need to take a turn to do it versus the build around card just always essentially being in your opening hand. So that's, having it be card selection towards the legendary does make it significantly less likely that you're going to be able to play your build around card. So is this enough? That's my question. It solves a lot of my problems, but is this enough? And here's another issue. I explicitly printed it on a red card for this reason. This type of commune with effect is generally not seen on red and black cards. So is this a color pie break? I mean, there are a couple of red, there's maybe 3, red cards that have this type of effect on it, but it's kind of a color pie break because typically in red, you either have impulsive draw, where you have to exile and then play the card that turn, or you have, discard to draw, either loot or rummage. So, this is not that. This is just straight up getting an extra card. What do you guys think? Is this too much of a color pie break to be printing this like this? It's specific to legendaries and lands, and even the lands is a little bit of a color pie break. Typically only green can tutor out, or not tutor, but, find lands in this way consistently. So I don't know. Should there even be a fallback mode? Should it be only legendary? Does that make it less of a color pie break? If it's just that, I don't know. You guys tell me. But again, it's definitely not as consistent as the commander format. And then here's another variation. This is really simple. Just legend cycling. It's not card advantage because you have to discard to get it. It's also not even as much card advantage as this mode where you're discarding a card to tutor a legendary out, because in limited, again, after turn 5 or 6, you're going to be happy to pitch a land to get a playable card. So this is still virtually card advantage in a limited environment in the late game, whereas this is not. You are pitching this playable card in order to get a different playable card. The legend cycling is not on your basic mountain, for example. So that kind of solves that problem in the sense that this is no longer even virtual card advantage anymore. You are still tutoring, and so it still does create the issue where I'm highly incentivizing playing a legendary toolkit strategy in any color pair. I'm also just saying in general, legendaries are that much better because they are tutorable, but not quite as good as these two variations because they're either actual or virtual card advantage in a limited environment. So I don't know. I like this. I think it's elegant. I think it fits into a mechanic that already exists in a way that I don't even need to read the reminder text. I know exactly what this does just reading the ability already. It also is pretty dang flavorful still. It makes sense in Zelda. There's these cycles of returning, legendary creatures. Link comes back in many different forms and is reincarnated and whatever. So I think that it does work from that perspective. And, even though it's strong, I still have the ability to modulate this quite significantly by giving it a very, very high mana cost. So yeah, maybe you want to take legends more highly and you want to do a toolkit strategy, but this is really costly. You're going to take a turn off to do it, to get that legendary card before you can even play it immediately. So if it's in a format where generally all the cards are kind of worse than normal and they're reliant on synergies to come alive, which is what I'm trying to do, then I'm maybe not able to do legend cycling and just do a legendary matter strategy or a toolkit strategy because, yeah, even though I can consistently tutor them, the cost is very significant. And that was the idea behind the design of this particular card. So, I don't know. Again, I'm leaning more towards this, not to bias you, but that was my case. But now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I'm more in the legend cycling camp. I don't know. What do you guys think? What's your particular preference? Do you have another idea? A particular idea is I could just throw up my hands and say, screw it. It's a commander draft format. and just take advantage of all these problems are already solved. If I just make a commander draft, I have a 20 card pack, I have a pick two, guaranteed 2 card slots that are legendary creatures. All these problems are solved for me. It's just that as originally envisioned, I had imagined this as a normal set. And it's not quite as simple as, okay, let's make a commander draft, because there are some things that are inherent to commander draft that I would have to then deal with. So, for example, commander draft formats typically have very, very, very large card pools, like 500 cards, as opposed to low 200s, so more than twice as big. And the first commander draft format, as an example, had, I can't remember, it's 112 or 122 potential commanders. So, a question was, are there even enough cards in Zelda that can do that? Well, don't you think that I didn't go doing my homework? Like, I've been working my butt off, on this. So let's take a look at that, because I did that. I said, okay, is that even possible? So here is a list of 156 different potential creatures, only creatures, if I wanted to be commander draft or whatever. I mean, if I was thinking about just legendaries in general and whatever, then this could be even larger. Now I'm including the Master Sword, or the Master Sword could say this can be your commander. I'm considering spells that could be legendary, whatever. And then I rank them. How good is the name recognition? Like Link obviously gets 1. The sages like Rauru and Saria that reappear a lot get 1. Any boss, especially if they are a final boss, like say Calamity Ganon, gets 1, or Skull Kid gets 1. But then, other kids like Eslo, many people would know who that is, but many people might not. Beetle the Merchant might not have immediate name recognition, but I can absolutely see like flavorfully building around it. And then you have characters like Groose. Okay, now we're really getting down there. I don't know that you can reliably do that. Errol at 4. I'm ranking it as 4. Or Mamamoo Yan. Credits if you even know who that is. It's the dog owner from Ocarina of Time, and I think she's also in Majora's Mask. There's no way in hell that I'm making her a card at all in the game, much less as like a build-around legendary creature. But yeah, who are the people even with proper names that I could reliably do this at? And my count is over here. I have 91 or 90 that I've ranked at number 1, and 37 that I've ranked at number 2. So that is 127 cards, even just amongst the 1s and 2s, that, I could actually have a card pool big enough, even just looking at creatures, not even thinking about the Master Sword yet, or the Triforce, or any other thing that, could also be a legendary build-around. So it is possible, and I even did a little analysis here of, okay, what colors could these creatures go in? Not like Link is a, white, blue, green card, but like it could reasonably be those cards, and red too. It just can't be black. I don't think that makes sense for Link. But and then I took a look at, okay, how does that shake out? Do I have enough coverage? And across the 2 color pairs, there's a absence here in white and black, which that has been plaguing me this whole set. It's really hard flavorfully to think about what could be both white and black. I have some ideas around that, but in any case, it's just an issue. I think if you're going to design a Zelda set, there's some flavor issues there. And then even with the 3 color pairs, again, white and black rearing its head here, with small numbers in those, shards and wedges that would have white and black combined together. So it's potentially possible is what I'm getting at. So I don't know. Maybe I just throw my hands up and I say, if I really want to do this thing where I can have these idiosyncratic build-around cards, the best thing to do is just make it a commander draft format and, commit to that. But I'm still interested in having a smaller set overall. And, the other thing about commander draft is it fixes combinatronics problem, right? If I have 2 monocolored commanders, it's really interesting because I'm thinking about how they interact together and the different card pools that I might have around both of them combined, rather than, oh, okay, I'm playing the Link set again. So even though there are, quote unquote, only 120 potential commanders in, Commander Draft, the original Commander Draft format, because of the combinatronics, there are actually thousands of different commander sets that I could be playing because of partner and because of monocolored commanders. So yeah, that solves that problem too. I don't know. You tell me, what do you think? Which of these is your favorite? Vote now. We've got one, two, I forget this one I showed third, three, or four. Which one is your favorite? Or is it option 5, Commander Draft? Just make a Commander Draft format? Or is it option 6, something that you'd like to suggest in the comments? Yeah, I don't know. I got to figure this out and soon, because I really am getting tired of sitting in the doldrums here. I want to get back to designing individual cards and finishing my set. That would be great. So let me know. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.